Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the Podcast. I am your host, Anna, and I am so delighted to be kicking off a bonus series of sorts today. This is mostly thanks to my Patreon folks. You all know who you are. But when I was brainstorming with them about what kind of episodes they wanted to see kind of come from the show other than author interviews, there was a request for more interviews, kind of inside baseball interviews. And one of those areas that people wanted to hear more about is podcasting. And so I thought, what better way to do podcasting interviews than to phone some friends of the pod, sit down with them, talk about podcasting, talk about what they're up to now, talk about their work, talk about how things were when they started podcasting, and just, a general good conversation. And luckily, everybody that I reached out to was like, hell yeah. So, without further ado, I am stoked to bring this first iteration of this bonus series to you all. And Miss Agatha Andrews of She Wore Black joins me to talk about the podcast, She Wore Black, obviously, her current research that she's doing for her current book, her past experience that's kind of lent itself to writing She Wore Black, and we talk about so many other things, mostly the Gothic and our understanding of the Gothic and all kinds of other things. It's a really great conversation. I'm so stoked to be sharing it with all of you. Yeah, and I'll catch up with you guys after this on the outro. Hello, Agatha. Welcome to Anna Rose Reads. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is going to be so much fun.
I know. I feel like we've interacted in the internet space for a very long time, but this is the first time that we're actually having like a formal chit chat. I'm very, very thrilled to be doing so. So thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you for asking me. That was really nice of you.
Oh no,
I know
look,
you're super busy.
I did it to myself. I do the busyness to myself. I keep asking people to do interviews. They keep saying yes, so we keep rolling with it. But yeah, so I'm kind of to let all of my listeners know I'm going to talk about this in my intro, but in the brief event that I don't cover that as fully as I'm planning to, I wanted to spotlight my fellow podcasters and what they've accomplished and kind of bring their knowledge and their experience to the table whenever it comes to working in the podcasting space, the book space, just like anywhere adjacent in the creative space. And I thought, what better person than to ask Miss Agatha Andrews of She Wore Black. I've been listening to your podcast off and on for like the last, I think, 2 and 3 years. I know that you kind of gear a little bit more towards romance, and I hate to say it, I am not as much of a romance reader sometimes, but all of your horror episodes, I am there for. But if people are not as familiar with you as I am, do you want to go ahead and just briefly introduce yourself for my listeners?
Sure. I am Agatha Andrews. I am the host of She Wore Black, which is actually a Gothic mystery and horror podcast. I do play around quite a bit in the romance space, but it is not primarily a romance podcast. It is mostly Gothic-ish. Gothic-ish.
Yes.
Basically, if there's anything that isn't Gothic, there's a through line to it. So, I just have a lot of fun with my spooky self and hope that everybody else has fun with it too. I'm a writer as well, but you won't see my book for a while. That doesn't come out till February of 2028. So
That's still exciting. That's still a very exciting accomplishment. And, whatever you want to talk about with that, I'm more than happy to chat about it. But if we want to just keep this focus to She Wore Black, totally get it. But no,
that's up to you. You're the host.
Okay, well, listen, I'm happy to talk about anything. But I do want to go ahead and talk about you are one of the most respectably knowledgeable people that I know about the Gothic, because I feel like in social media and like on social media in our present moment, there's a lot of debate about like what is Gothic, what isn't Gothic, what people kind of consider to fall in this somewhat genre, but even vibe space. Like I think that the whole thing with Wuthering Heights coming out was a big moment
Yeah.
of what is Gothic and what is not. And I did turn to you and your chat with Neil McRobert of Talking Scared to kind of just, enjoy that conversation. And I wanted to kind of let you talk about the Gothic and your relationship with the Gothic and how you view the Gothic.
Well, I invited Neil on for that episode I had an episode called What is Gothic, and I
Hmm.
invited Neil on for that. And then Neil had me on his show
Yes.
to talk about Wuthering Heights. So And I had had Neil on my show to talk about it because he's got the academia, he's got the I mean I do too, but mine was in different fields. Mine was like library and information science, and I
Yes.
have an art history degree as well. And his he literally has a PhD in Gothic. So I wanted that on so that there's this kind of gatekeeping idea, which I didn't want to do, but
Hmm.
I do think it's important because literacy as a former librarian is one of my biggest concerns. And so I wanted people to understand that Gothic was more than just vibes, you
Yes.
so, I mean, vibes matter. Don't get me wrong. I love a vibe, but, but it is more than that. And so I wanted to have that talk with him about it. I believe you've mentioned before
Hmm.
that you were an only child.
I am, yeah.
I too am an only child. So there's a lot about the Gothic that I related to because, and I'm not trying to say, Anna, that I'm more only child than you, but I am, but I am a Gen X only child,
Yeah.
which means I was alone all the time, all my childhood.
Yeah.
And to the point where I was so accustomed to being alone in my room or I'd be outside running feral with my friends. It was one extreme or the other. But if I was alone in the house, which was usually the case in the summer, you're from the South also, so it's very
Yes.
hot. So
Hmm.
you're inside when it's over 100 degrees. And I was just so accustomed to that isolation. I would
Yeah.
get in my head a lot. So the things with Gothic that I relate to are those that sense of isolation and the question of madness. Not that I ever doubted myself, but I just was in my head. I had a big imagination as a child. And so those are things that I are part of my id and are
Hmm.
very much a part of Gothic. Now, things that are tropes in Gothic are also lots of fun. Like I love some poison tea. I love a governess.
Yes.
I mean, there's those sorts of things as well. But the thing that resonates most with me, aside from the aesthetic of Gothic, because
Yeah.
that's so much fun,
Hmm.
is just they're spooky and creepy, but they're not straight horror in the same way as maybe a
Yeah.
slasher would be. It's the dread. I love a slow buildup of dread. I used to creep around my house to try to scare myself. And, when you're alone and you're 9 or 10, which again, Gen X, we were all the time alone. Or we, like I said, feral with our friends, but like there was a lot of ways to get into that. So I would, do the slow buildup of dread just by creeping around the house and pretending it was haunted. I mean, just different things like that. So it's just something that's always been there. I think you're born into Gothic.
Yeah. No, look, I can see it. And I have to ask you this because I think it's so funny. But did you ever, because I mean, I identify a lot of what you just said.
Yeah.
I really enjoy being alone a lot of the time.
Yes.
And so whenever, you start learning about the Gothic in school and the madness, the inherent madness is a big part of this, right? You're like, huh, I didn't even know that was a danger. Like I didn't even
Yeah.
know, like I don't see
Yeah.
what the issue is. So I had that moment of, huh, I guess I do need to be a little bit careful about how much time I spend alone. Um, you know.
Mortality is also a big question. Like, I mean, the whole idea
Yeah.
of hauntings and all of that really resonated with me. I actually experienced a tremendous amount of death. It was just like my aunt who lived with us died the week she turned 19. I was five
Oh
or six
wow.
years old. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just like from there, it was just this horrible, like, I don't know why. I just had so much death as a child that in my life. And so it's like I turned to the Gothic to kind of work through that.
Yeah, that
And
makes
so
sense.
again, I wasn't like experiencing a question of madness for myself or anything. It was literally like therapy,
Yeah.
working through these questions. And then I went to Catholic school to compound all that.
I did too. I went to Catholic school, and I think that that must have been
Okay,
it for me because I was
Gothic only
also,
children can
yeah.
blame like Catholicism only child. Like we didn't have a choice. I have to
No,
be
no,
Gothic.
you literally spent hours of the week in front of a bloody man on a cross. I mean, I don't know how you don't develop somewhat of a fascination, fixation, or need to understand death
when that is before you at all times, especially with guilt and punishment,
Yeah.
like that is emotionally that's so isolating. So I don't know how you don't feel that way when you go to Catholic school. I never like most of the death that I've experienced and grief has been later in life, so I didn't really have that growing up, but I was always kind of fascinated with the darker and the macabre and things like that. So it's really interesting to kind of see where these things take hold for different people in different points of their life. But I also kind of want to give you the space to talk about your time as a librarian and
Oh, okay.
your like art history degree and all those things. I've heard you talk about it on your podcast, and it always really fascinates me. But that you brought up literacy, and literacy is so crucial. I know we could probably spend the next hour talking about just that. But yeah, I wanted to give you the space to talk about your time as a librarian and how that has led you to here.
Well, so the podcast, I've had various incarnations of it for ages, but it for me it was an extension of being a librarian.
Hmm.
My kid, I stopped working in a library when we moved away from my parents, like back to the Austin area where I had always lived. I wanted to be close to my parents when my child was a baby. But I wasn't going to raise my kid down there. And so
So fair.
we we moved back to the Austin area, and it was just one of those things where it's really difficult when you're raising a child, especially when who's on the autism spectrum. So that means you have to fight for everything for him, like
Yes.
fight for their education, fight for their medical care, etc. And so I still wanted to retain a part of myself. I didn't want to just be one thing. I needed my librarianship back.
Hmm.
So the podcast is a return to something I had done for many years in one shape or one form or another, but it's an extension of that work for me.
Yeah.
And that work is connecting people to books, connecting people to the concept of literacy and culture. And not that I'm like always highbrow. I mean, we've talked about how much I fucking love a lighthouse. Like it's not always that serious, but it is connecting people to books and that's and information, because I've had episodes completely dedicated to literacy, or I've had episodes dedicated to book banning.
Yep.
There's different things that I also use that platform for. So yeah, I got an art history degree, and I wanted to either work in a museum or work in archives, but then I got concerned that I wouldn't find a job, which was dumb because the second I was like almost midway through my library approach, it wasn't dumb. It was just I didn't realize how many people were like, we need
Yeah,
archivists.
yeah.
All the archivists are retiring. And I was like, oh my God. But it's fine. I was a teacher for a few years. And so you have to be a teacher for 2 years before you can apply to be for your master's to be a librarian, which is required to be a librarian. And so I went the school librarian route. There was a few years in there where I was also a branch manager of a public library. I opened a library, started that collection from scratch. I was involved with the architecture and everything, the
Dang,
design and
yeah.
stuff. So that was a really great experience because I do love working with the public. I'd been a bookseller for a long time too. So
Yeah.
it's always just been there. I've always been, even when I was in art school, I was immersed in the literary scene. My boyfriend is a big fancy literary dude right now, and so the boyfriend I had in college. Um, and so it was just always around, and it was just always something, a part of what I was doing, gosh, from high school. So yeah, it's just an extension of that work. I just really think it's important to get people excited. You don't want to
Yeah.
pound people over the head. I remember so many times where students would come in, or maybe a public patron would come in and just talk about how, well, they don't read because they don't like anything. And I would always kind of go back to, well, you just haven't found what works for you. And I might say something along the lines of, is there a movie? Are there movies that you like to watch? And let's start there. Like, let's kind of go into, oh, okay, well, you like suspense? Let me show you where the Born Identity came from.
Yeah.
Things like that. And then you get people excited. And so that's the point. It's just what I always loved doing.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up something that I had talked to somebody else about this earlier this year, and it has to do with kind of the decline in literacy and people reading. We keep hearing about how people don't read and all this stuff. But I think that it's almost like a communication issue that I feel like we're really facing down as a public because, with the rise of social media, it's never been easier to be like, these are the five books that you should be reading right now.
Right.
And that's very generalized. And then if you have a person who's giving reading a shot for the first time in like 5 years and they pick up the wrong book and they have a terrible time, then that's another 5 years that they might be down and out on reading. You know what I mean? So I think it's almost knowing yourself well enough of what you're interested in, and then finding the right person who speaks that language to help you land with the book that will do it for that will interest you, that will prolong that interest in reading. I'm kind of curious if you had that experience in working in this space that you ran into that because I just feel like right now people are picking up the wrong books and that's sometimes why they hate reading.
I think that's absolutely true. That's what happens because the thing is like the elementary school children are always very excited about
Yeah.
books. And as they get older, things like AR testing, which I could have an entire dedicated episode about how much I hate it and why I was on a crusade about it as a librarian. But I was amongst many librarians who hated it. There was just this sort of dependence that people had on it. But what that goes to is when you quantify the reading experience, it's not the same
Hmm.
as actually reading and getting comprehension out of it, getting something valuable out of it, getting something you like out of it.
Yeah.
And then what would frustrate me is where reading systems would be in place where a kid couldn't read above or below wherever their last test score was. And that used to drive me nuts because
Yeah.
they would want to read all kinds of things. But, and the thing is like, it was so arbitrary. Like a Hank the Cowdog book in an AR system might be, and I mean accelerated reader for anybody who doesn't know what AR is, and God bless you if you don't, because it's not worth knowing. But it would Hank the Cowdog would be like one grade level below To Kill a Mockingbird because the language that Scout uses is child language, even if the things that are happening in the book are more sophisticated. That's it. This is the problem when you depend on like that kind of data
Yeah.
versus higher level thinking. Like with standardized testing, kids have been taught to read in a different way and
Hmm.
have been kind of beaten over the head. Like they're like one of my very favorite humans and my absolute favorite teacher of all time died this week.
Oh,
And
I'm so sorry.
and I think about him a lot because he was able to, and the reason why I bring him up is because he's a perfect example of what I was talking about. He
Hmm.
was allowed to flourish as a teacher before all of this crap kicked in.
Yeah.
So we got from him what teaching should be
Hmm.
instead of all of this like data driven, let's squash curiosity, let's not give a shit about higher level thinking, all of that kind of stuff. And it was very frustrating. And so there's like all these news stories that are out about him because he loved history so much that he continued it when he retired. He created a local news segment on local history, and he made history very tangible for us. And there's all kinds of things he did. I actually wrote an essay about him that was published about 10 years ago. But he was able to do that because we weren't stifling teachers as
Hmm.
well as children. And now that we're doing that, we're in this literacy crisis.
Yeah.
And I just think, gosh, if he was teaching now, that kids would be at a loss because he wouldn't be able to do what his gift is.
Yeah.
And that's true for a lot of teachers. That would have been true for me. I mean, even I was the beginning of my career was at when all of this No Child Left Behind garbage started, the George Bush era of education started. And it's I saw it starting to crumble at that time. Like I knew what I was looking at,
Hmm.
because I knew what I had as a student
Hmm.
versus what I was seeing, what we were forced to do. And
Yeah.
there was a certain point also when, like my last years were actually at a Catholic high school because I just had a lot more flexibility. It was
Yeah.
considered a prep school. They wanted their students prepped for college, so they weren't concerned with book bans. They wanted their kids to read everything and be prepared for everything that they were going to face in college. The nuns were like, "We trust you." You know, by the way, I think nuns are pretty goth. Just saying.
We only had one at my elementary school, and she was very mean. Actually, she still used a ruler, so it was like
So
second
she was
grade.
the Mrs. Danvers kind of nun. Okay.
She was very old school, so
I had very hip nuns. Our nuns were very, very cool, very hip. Like they were very, they would wear ribbons in support of like queer communities
oh, that's so
and
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
there
and
was
they
none of that. There was none of that.
yeah, and they would
But
talk about they were very on a big anti-bullying crusade and they would and elementary school ones were cool too. They would slip us, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret," and say,
right
you'll have
on.
questions. And they would tell students all the time, like our nuns were great. I'm sorry for people that didn't have nuns like this, but they would tell our students who would say, "Well, what if we don't believe in God?" And they're like, "Well, that's your journey. And if you decide to come back to God at some point in your life, then that's because you've made the journey you're supposed to have for you. But it's an entirely your thing and blah blah blah." And they're like, "We don't want you here if you feel like you're forced." And I was just so impressed with these ladies
I'm
because
impressed.
yeah,
Shit.
they were also not part of the diocese. They were Catholic, but they were not part of
Interesting.
the diocese. Yeah,
Huh.
they came from France during the French Revolution and this particular order, and they kind of set up house the way they wanted. And I'm very convinced that these ladies are the same ladies that set it up after the French Revolution
Good for
because they're
them.
still alive.
Good for them. Hell yeah. No,
I was
our
just
nuns are
telling a
not like
friend of
that.
mine, Sister Catherine's still alive? And she's like, how? And I'm like, I think that that's just the way they are. They're vampires.
I'm sorry. That's so funny. That's so
We're in
good.
our 50s, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, no. No, I totally get it. No, yeah. It's so, my mom was an educator for God, I think it was 30 years-ish, somewhere around there. And I mean, she retired and she's just, the whole AI thing, the change in education, all that, especially with the pandemic. It was just, she just was done. She
Yeah,
felt like she couldn't handle it anymore. And, she's a math teacher. She's not very, she doesn't like flowery language. She's very
right.
logical to the point. And it was to the point where she felt like the disconnect was too big between the parents and the students and what she was trying to teach and the students' willingness to learn and, like technology implementation and the cheating and like just all of that was, it's a whole different time in education. So I can't imagine what it's like on the on the English front, like trying to,
Yeah.
confront this crisis right now, presently. But I had some really great English teachers when I was in school, and I didn't hate reading. I didn't love reading the way that I
Yeah.
do now, but I didn't hate it. And that's a lot more than a lot of kids can say about their time in school.
Right. Well, and they're going to find, look, they're going to seek things out. They're going to find things. The, the hard part is knowing that there's like generations that are going to struggle with higher level thinking issues
Yeah.
their whole life, and it's not their fault.
Hmm.
What frustrates me is that people will go like, these kids can't even read a clock anymore, with that's not digital. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not their fault.
Yep.
That you can blame No Child Left Behind and all those other things for this. That's not their fault. Like instead of doing that attitude,
Hmm.
I think like coming at all of this in a positive way, which goes back to I don't actually mind. I don't like books as aesthetic only.
Hmm.
I do like I'm going to be on that influencers panel, for example,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and my thing is I don't necessarily consider myself an influencer. I consider myself closer to journalism at this point
Yeah.
because podcasts and I think about my library a lot. So I had programs and I had displays. And I think
Hmm.
what influencers do are closer to the work that displays do. And I think that what you and I do are closer to what programs do, both of which are essential to connect to your patrons, both of
Yes.
which are essential to excite people about what you offer and what books are out there and what's in them. But they do it different ways and they have different functions.
Yep.
Displays are for the person that wants to do it on their own and browse and grab what appeals to them. It could be based on a cover, whatever. It could be an author like, oh, I didn't know this person had a new book out. And then a program is a little bit deeper dive. And one's not more valuable than the other. It's just approaches.
Yep.
And so I don't, that's why that's something that's interesting that I was invited and Stephanie also, we're going to be podcasters on there. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if what we do qualifies as influencers, but I'm not worried about it. The only thing I'm worried about is connecting people to books.
Well, no, and I'm so glad that you bring this up because this is something that I do kind of want to talk to you about. And it's something that I don't want to say struggle with because it's not really a struggle, but people will ask, like whenever I do an introduction, it's like, who are you and what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm everywhere. I'm just talking
Right.
about books. I have a hard time putting myself in a box because, like I write reviews whenever I can. I do the podcast, which is mostly author interview based, but I'm trying to dig into the meteor stuff there. But I mean, I do post on social media, and I want to be thankful to the publishers who are sending me the stuff so that I can do
Yeah.
this. And that's a huge part of the social media aspect is, kind of the advertising part of it. So it's a weird time to kind of be in the space. And like you said, there's kind of different prongs of this, and I don't know that we've developed the right uh, identification system for that yet, you know?
I think we have to kind of just like watching a TV show, flip around and see what we like. And as far as identification, God knows. But
Yeah.
I think if like my show was on NPR, they would call me a journalist, but it's not because I'm not Terry Gross. What I'm doing is different with respect to I have the same objectives, but Terry is Terry Gross. She is Terry Gross with NPR, and I am not.
You
I'm
do a great NPR voice, though. I love it.
Oh,
It's fabulous.
well, thank you. but, I mean, I have fun, I relax. But the thing is like we're also different target audiences. When you
Yeah.
look at your listener data, you'll have like age demographics, sex demographics, or gender, whatever you want to call it. And mine are overwhelmingly female, and mine are millennial and Gen X primarily. Do I have things outside of that? Sure. Sure. But I know who I target as a podcaster too.
Hmm.
Yes, I do have quite a bit of romance on there, but it's like a gothic swoon
Yeah.
usually. It's a gothic swoon. I mean, if I have anything that isn't, it might be a historical romance, and it might be a historical romance where maybe if it is a rom-com, maybe the protagonist is a gothic writer
Yeah.
in Victorian England. Like there's always going to be a through line back to I'm a gothic mystery and horror podcast. Like I never go without a connective thread, if
Oh,
that makes any
absolutely.
sense. And so that's
Yeah.
important. So basically we make our own identity because I don't know if anybody else knows what to do with us.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I know. Look, I get it. And I think, one of my favorite conversations that I think that I've heard on your podcast was the one that you did with Simone St. James. I think it was like 2 years ago now, maybe. Murder Road.
Oh yeah.
That was a really good one because it was the first time that I had kind of heard I felt like the marriage of the dark mystery, kind of darker side of fiction married with romance in a way that wasn't that confrontational. I mean, like that whole episode, people should just go listen to it. But it was about how the couple in that book is not going after one another like a domestic
Yeah.
thriller. Like it was very much, and I really, really enjoyed that nuance of that conversation. And I feel like you do that with a lot of the books that you talk about. And I really appreciate that lens because I think, like you said, you carry that through line through every little, I don't know if subgenre is the right word, but kind of iteration of that through every book that you talk about, you
Yeah,
know?
there's always going to be a connective thread. And one of the things I love is about romance is that there's an incredible amount of character work that has to happen in order for
Yeah.
it to be a successful story. And I have said from the beginning, and I mean, I've been doing this for years now, is that horror writers would absolutely benefit from reading more romance. And so, like, I had started, so backstory, I started the podcast, then we had pandemic times, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh, God, I can't do this right now. And I put it down. I
Yeah.
picked it back up. And when I picked it back up, some of my early episodes were having Josh Mallerman come on to talk about Anne Rice.
I
And I
remember
got,
that episode. Yeah.
do you? Oh my God. Well, so I got him to read Elizabeth Hoyt, one of my favorite romance writers of all time. He sent me an email going, okay, my Hoyt came in, and he showed me a picture. And, but I had Simone St. James even on before that. And in my first chat with her, I had to talk about Haunting of Maddie Clare like way back in the day because
Yeah.
again, I've always walked this line with romance and gothic. And there is no question when you're reading The Haunting of Maddie Clare that it is as much a romance as it is a horror novel. And it is a very effective horror novel, but it is effective because she is as good at the romance in there as she is at the horror. And she said, "Oh, well, that's because I wanted to be Elizabeth Hoyt." And I'm like, "Don't we all?" So, I mean, I and her writing benefits from her love of those authors as well.
Yeah.
And so, in her first five novels, there's a romance in them. And
Hmm.
there's always been something romantic in subsequent novels where she's known for more horror, but there's never not a romantic element in them.
Yeah.
And as a result, she's got strong characters. So, and just because she knows how to do that kind of character work.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and I'm far from an expert in romance, and I pick up one every now and then, or sometimes the horror that I read has that
Right.
to it. But like I'm just not as well versed in that as or confident as I am speaking about that as I am about horror. But I feel like both, you have to have really developed characters that you were invested in to be successful in getting that plot to move anywhere. Because if you're not worried about the safety or the happiness, or
Right.
whatever about those characters in both of those instances, then that story tends to fall pretty flat, or at least in my experience, it has. So they're two sides of the same coin. I totally agree with what you say about horror writers could benefit from reading more romance because it's the same really heightened emotional stakes, just in two opposite directions, is what it feels like.
I've had that talk with Neil on the show before.
Yeah, yeah.
Because especially early on and for both of us when we were both first getting to know each other because um I said think about the first time you went on a date with Georgia. Think about that and like or even asking her out on that date in the first place. There were
Yeah.
stakes involved, or just leaning in to get that first kiss. But here's the thing is like we all know that a romance is going to have a happy ending. So why would we read something where we already know the ending? Well,
Hmm.
we're going to read the journey. And so the journey has to be exciting. And
Yeah.
how is it exciting? Well, you've got amazing characters. And you can have really intense plots. You can have very horrific plots. I've had Laurel K. Hamilton on,
Hmm.
who is and plenty of other people. I mean, Diana Biller, there's plenty of people that do what Simone St. James was doing in some of those early novels of hers, where the romance is as important as the horror. And I mean, the book I'm writing has it's those women running from houses. There's that gothic suspense. I'm going to have Christina Henry on the show very soon
Oh yeah.
talking about one particular author from that era because she has read all of the Mary Stewarts and in a post that she made today, I was like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of that book right now." And she said, "This book has the single most suspenseful scene ever written to me in
Hmm.
her opinion." And I'm like, that's quite a statement for Christina
Henry to be
Henry
saying that, yeah.
to say that Mary Stewart wrote the single most suspenseful scene that she's ever read is a big deal. And so these are some things that are important to me because one of my biggest objectives with the show
Hmm.
is to center female voices. It always has been. Now, I've had an occasional guy on the show. I've had Neil. I have my friend Johnny Compton and a couple of other people that
I love
I
Johnny. I could
know
talk to
well.
Johnny all day.
Oh, can't we all?
Yes.
And and some other like if they've been on the show, there's somebody that I know really well, but I don't even have all my male friends on. Like
Yeah.
it's not any disrespect to them or their work. It's literally like if I have the opportunity to recommend a book, I'm going to recommend a woman if I can first, and
Hmm.
then maybe I'll think about recommending some dudes. But they're going to be very far back on the list, and it's not that they don't have anything to offer. It's just that so many horror shows. I mean, Stephanie had been on the scene for a long time when
Hmm.
I started back on my show, because I had started mine in like 2018 or 19 or something like that, and then I went back to it. But she had already been doing it even longer than that. And there was one other show that had kind of birthed and then stopped doing theirs, and then that was it. And then every time I would listen to a horror show, it was always male centered.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I just that that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just not my jam. And so again, I'll have the occasional dude, but there I have plenty of guys who will listen to the show and say, "Oh my gosh, I've learned so much." That I hadn't thought about before. And it's not like I'm, shimmying my shoulders with an I told you so kind of idea. It makes me happy that they even gave it a chance.
Oh
It
yeah.
makes me happy that they've given some of these romantic people a chance. They'll reach out to me and ask for like suggestions or things like that. And that makes me happy because women have been part of horror from the beginning. We've been
Well,
the
that
overwhelming
yeah.
number of writers for them for through all of the centuries that we've been writing horror. Women have been at the center of it, the biggest part of it. Like, why are we still in our brains centering men when they think about horror?
Yeah,
So,
well, you bring me to a great point, which is Shirley Jackson. I would love to talk to you
yes.
about Shirley Jackson and all that good stuff. But the big thing too, I want to talk about before we leave this point is what you have accomplished and are accomplishing with the podcast and kind of how it's grown since it started back in 2018, 2019. Then you said like kind of picked up after the pandemic and stuff. Did you, you know, I know for me, my podcast is like I'm going to do this as long as I'm able, and whatever I get out of it, I get out of it.
Right.
That's great. But I'm very curious for you if you had like from the jump, like a very well-intentioned goal of like this is what I'm gonna do and we're gonna, I'm gonna build this community and this kind of thing. Because like for me, I didn't think that a lot of like what I found was like possible. It took me a minute to get my footing and to kind of grow into the comfortability of this space because I'm an introvert, believe it or not. I'm an extrovert introvert, but I'm an introvert all the same. So I'm curious for you, like, is if the She Wore Black that you started back then, if you thought it would look the way that it does today, and kind of how that's changed for you over the years.
The only thing that was different about the original incarnation, and I've taken the episodes out that I'm about to refer to, is that I included things that weren't always just books.
Hmm.
Because like I said, in one shape or form, I've always done this.
Yeah.
And so I included artists because I've interviewed artists and I've interviewed authors for like 20 years.
Hmm.
And it would be sometimes for newspapers, sometimes for magazines, sometimes for my cool pre-YouTube show that I had. Um, that was all books though,
Yeah.
because I'd worked here in Austin as a bookseller, and so I had access to every author that came through Austin, and I worked for a flagship Barnes and Noble, so they all came through there. And that was so it was just easy, and that was nice. So when I had stopped, She Wore Black. And again, it was great. It was all still the same aesthetic. It was still gothic. It
Hmm.
was just that I would interview people that had exhibits at the local art museums, or I would, just anything kind of arts and culture. I'd done that for so long. It was very comfortable for me. And
Yeah.
living in Austin, I'm spoiled. I am just rich in all of that here. So I have no shortage of opportunity to write about these things. And so, um, when I stopped it, I wanted to kind of focus a little bit more and just kind of bring back what I was doing in libraries. Like I said, just connecting books to readers. I'm like, I'm just going to center this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same genres, like the same thing, but I just decided to go back to books, which is what I had done, for as a librarian. So that just worked out for me. When I started back though, it's because I was a contracted romance writer. I was on contract for a book,
Hmm.
but it was a smaller press, and it has happened over 1,000 times that I have seen on social media. And in the last 5 to 10 years, small presses will come and go,
Yeah.
and half the time it will be because they've done something really dumb, like not pay writers, or they would do something really dumb, like make racist statements that were public, you know,
Yeah.
things like this. So overnight, my publisher imploded in a racist Twitter debacle. And I was like, okay, well, I've got to switch gears. The thing is that even when I was a romance author,
Hmm.
I was always the gothic romance author. I was always the gothic person that like, so everybody kind of knew me in the romance world as that person. And that's back when monster romance was coming up and very big. So there was a lot of through lines with that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of horror work that's happening in monster romance. So, there was just all kinds of really interesting things happening at that time. And so, yeah, I just kind of went, well, this is what I've been doing anyway. The publisher is imploded. Let me just go back and to what I was doing, and I'll, get to do books again in a different way while I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on with my writing career. So, but
Makes
then I
sense.
kept writing like news, like magazine articles and stuff like that. So
Makes sense. Yeah. So I that's really interesting to me that you had kind of that exposure, like you mentioned, working as a bookseller and kind of like getting to work with authors and that kind of thing about, that kind of experience. I feel like that really probably shapes and your experience of interviewing other like local artists and that kind of thing, really sets you up for this kind of success in the podcasting space because, these interviews, I feel like I know for me as a listener, I there's nothing I love better than getting like three new episodes a week and just like setting them to go
yeah.
whenever I'd be commuting and driving to work. And because it enriches my reading life so much, right? Like because whenever you read, I think the way that we do, hearing all of this other background information is so vital. It makes the experience all the richer. And it's something that I really gravitated towards. And that was like partially why I wanted to get in on this, is because I was like, well, I think I have some questions too that maybe some people would want to hear the answers to. So it's really interesting that it kind of has grown in this way, like a continuation of that original iteration of that. But yeah, and I want to talk about your writing. Like, how do you balance writing and podcasting and all? And I'm sure that's a very complicated question. But I just want to hear a little bit about your writing and also still doing it while you're podcasting.
Well, in a way, what I'm writing is, so I'm working on a nonfiction, as I said.
Hmm.
It's called Women Running from Houses for anybody who doesn't already know. And it's centering, like, it's a lot like Paperbacks from Hell, but it's
Yes.
centering the gothic romance women, with the women running from houses, hence the very cool original name. So, but at least people know exactly what it is when they see those words, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And so, but I, with the art history and even with the library background, like research is my baby.
Yeah.
I love research. I've got this giant cart behind me, like full of books that I'm reading, and I've got a whole giant file down here full of periodicals and things that I've pulled and reference articles, and it's just such a joy for me to
Hmm.
go in deep dive, and I'm always uncovering like really cool, interesting things. And like just this last weekend, there's romance. I don't know that anybody that listens to your show knows anything about romance, but in the early aughts, there was a beloved romance writer, and I think she hasn't written anything in like, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, but she was a very popular romance writer, Jennifer Cruzy. And I'm like, is this profound editorial thing that I've just pulled? It's like a 20-page critical essay written by the Jennifer Cruzy. And it turns out, yes, she's apparently written like all this academic and stuff. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I'm like loving knowing that she's got like her sweet little covers with the swirly font at the same time that she's got these like really profound critical essays on what I
Yeah.
need to research. And so there's like always something fun I'm discovering along this journey. So it's just my baby. I love researching. I love writing. Um, Anytime that I'd done writing and published it, it was always nonfiction, because it wasn't always just interviews. There were times where I was asked to write and review things, I don't know, for visiting authors and stuff
Hmm.
like their novels. But I so that's a lot of fun, and I balance it by incorporating what I'm doing into the show.
Yeah. No, no, but I love that you do that though, because
Yeah.
there's nothing better than whenever somebody who is like excited about something and really in the thick of whatever that thing is, whether it's the
Yeah.
research or the whatever, and they get to talk about it, that excitement is so palpable and contagious. That's what makes it good podcasting. You know what I mean?
Well, yes, and it's not just a cheat or anything. I've always genuinely been interested. What remains my highest rated episode ever of all time, even outdoing himself all the times I've had him on the show, is Grady Hendrix talking to me on my episode about these vintage romances, gothic
Yes.
romances. Um, because he had that section in Paperbacks from Hell, and this was long before I even considered like submitting or anything my own book, but I loved this topic, and I've loved this topic for years. I've been reading these books for years. I know these authors. I've had my own collection for like 20 years. And, of course, I've been allowed to invest in it in growing that collection a lot the last few months. But yeah, I mean, even more than Grady coming on to talk about his own books or anybody else, like the highest rated episode is him coming to talk about these vintage Gothic romances. So I knew that there was interest.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while, I would have somebody come on to kind of talk about something peripherally related to it. Like I had Sarah Wendell come on to talk about Gothic romance, and she was able to talk about Mary Stuart, and some of these others that I'm reading for my book. And so, like, that's, yeah, Christina Henry is coming on to talk about Mary Stuart. I just had an episode. As of the time of this recording, it was last week's episode about clinch covers. I mean, clinch is great. Those old historical romances, and even if they were contemporary, they still had some form of clinch. But yeah, those were great too, and have a through line to the Gothic. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just so many suspenseful elements. It could still be somebody isolated in a manner, but it'll have a clinch cover instead or something. There's just fun ways, fun thing. And you know what I love about these old books? Just a side note,
Yeah.
there was just such this incredible freedom where they just didn't worry about a lot of things that
Yep.
people are worried about now. So, like, there's this kind of running joke on Fated Mates, which is a romance podcast, where they're like talking about old school historical romances. And they'll say, "Oh, that's they just did that for romance reasons, like to move the plot forward." And you just accept it, and you just know it's like for romance reasons. And I'm sitting here going, "Yes, okay." It He just accepts that there's like a dead body next to him, and he just tells her, "Don't worry about it." Like, and I'm like, "Yes." Now, some of these authors, like anything else, are as good as some are better than others, just like
Hmm.
horror, just like everything that you is read now. Like some are favorites and some aren't, like, oh man. I see what you're doing there, but it ain't that great.
Yeah.
Things like it, and it's an adventure to try to find those things. So the balance is really like I've incorporated into the show. My family is very helpful as far as like, if I need time to focus, my kids in
Yeah.
school, so I use a lot of that time. But
Yeah.
if he's home and I feel like I need to get a lot of work done, he minds his own business. He's 15. Um, he likes to be, and he even likes to eat in his room now. He's at that stage.
Yeah, you can use all that
It's
free time that you
fine.
can get. I totally get it.
Yeah.
No, and one of my favorite things about following you on social media is that you do share these really great covers that you come
Oh,
across.
thank you.
And I mean, my favorites are, and to get back to one of the things I want to talk to you about is the Shirley Jackson,
Oh,
like the We Have Always Lived in the Castle cover. That is like one, if I ever see it out in the wild, you will hear me
oh, the
scream from,
vintage one.
yeah, wherever
Yes.
you will hear me scream wherever you are in this world, and you'll be like, "Oh, Anna just found it." I love the artistry in the moodiness. There's just something so direct and so eloquent. It's hard for me to even put into words what
Well,
those
they're
kind of covers.
painted.
Yeah, they're just gorgeous. They get
Yeah,
to the point.
they're painted. And so all of these artists, all of these book covers have people designing. I mean, look, it's true now, like they're artists and everything designing the covers now, but they're painted. And there's
Hmm.
just something so special about a person who did a whole painting, not just like an illustrated like cartoon or whatever, that has a place, there's value. I understand that, but there is just something special where a person put a brush and messed with the everything, to give you something magnificent like that.
Yeah.
And that also goes back to them knowing their own art history. There's something wonderful about them. There'll be like subtle coded things like harkening back to Klimt or something like that, an artist that they know, and bringing about maybe some life experience too. You'll see things that you'll see artists. For example, George Zeal is a really good example of an artist who, and all of these artists didn't just do the women running from houses. They did romance, they did western, they did James Bond, they did suspense, they did all of them, and they knew mood.
Yeah.
They knew how to evoke a feeling in a way that only an artist like an artist who's handling it with their bare hands,
Yeah.
handling a brush or hand whatever, a pencil or anything with their bare hands. Like there's just something so intimate about that
Hmm.
that just evokes something delicious inside a reader who wants to look for their next read.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing.
There's
I post,
something just very iconic about it. Like, and
yeah.
I don't mean it in the, oh my God, she's so iconic. I mean, like, legitimately, it becomes the iconography for that story. Like, when you
Mhm.
think about that, you think about that cover, which I don't know that you can say sometimes for some of the books that we read now, you know? Like, that's an interesting thing that I've thought about is how some of these older vintage paperbacks, but even like paperbacks from Hell and the Romance, are the ones that stick and versus like now plot might stick more than a cover, you know, and like how that's changed.
And it's interesting because with these women running from houses, for example, there's something it, it not just tapped into the id with the story, but even authors here, let me find it. Like this is Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, and
Yes.
I posted the other day like this cover
Yeah.
of his book American Gothic, where they're also using an artist with that same kind of imagery and iconography because it's so powerful, and I know that there are stories that, like I said, some are good, some are not,
Yeah.
but for the most part, they're really good. The ones that I'm finding, just FYI, just a little tidbit from me to you,
Yeah.
is that what I have found, because there's, I'd say at least half
Hmm.
of these authors are men writing under a women's pen name to make money,
Yeah.
but the women who are writing really know how to write bangers.
I believe
They
that.
really know they because they're passionate about the actual genre.
Hmm.
They are passionate about these stories and you can see it in their work, and they are intelligent women telling these great stories. And what's interesting is that their approach, even to their protagonists, are different because these are women writing at a time in the mid-century when there's dealing with their own civil rights, dealing with birth control, dealing with financial security, dealing with all of these things in a way that's trying to be more independent. You'll see that in in those stories that are written by women.
Yeah.
And then when you have the men writing under women's pen names, it's a lot more like campfire stories. The vibe is different when you're reading them. Are they fun? Sure. They're like the Brady Bunch. You enjoy it, you sit through the whole thing, but Sherwood Schwartz doesn't bring to the table the same kind of thing that Mary Stewart's going to bring to the table, that kind of stuff. So it's just really interesting to see that dynamic as well.
Well, it's something like so I just read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson for the very first time.
I'm
Like
sorry, you keep trying to talk about Shirley Jackson and I just talk about other things. I'm so sorry.
no, but all of this ties into that because there was something. So I hadn't read it until like 6 months ago, and in some ways, I'm like really pissed that I hadn't read it sooner because it's one of my favorite books now. But in a
But
lot
don't do
of
that to yourself with classics. As a
yeah,
librarian, let me tell you, you have license to read things when you're supposed to read them.
well, that's the other thing about it too is like I don't know that I would have had the life experience and the kind of emotional maturity to appreciate all of what Shirley Jackson puts in that book. And there is something about the like despair and the need to fit in and belong that you read with Eleanor's story that was uniquely female of wanting to escape this very caged life that she always lived and then being thrown in this malevolent house to where it's just Shirley Jackson just dismantles it piece by piece by piece, and that's why it's so devastating and so horrific. But there's some, it's like a sixth sense, like it's so hard to identify and name what it is other than it's a woman who's gone through it and she probably gets it. That's the easiest thing that you can point to is like she just gets it. There's a woman on the other side of this book that understands it and you feel seen by it. And that's why a lot of the horror that I read and I really appreciate does come from women because there's nothing like a woman getting what you are going through, even if it's been an iota, like a
Yeah.
fraction of it. There's nothing like that. And I think that that's something that I've found with Shirley Jackson's books. I've always been a little afraid that reading older stuff, like I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna quote unquote get it the way that I'm supposed to and all this kind of stuff. But that's not been a thing with her work, which has been really interesting to discover.
You know who's written a magnificent critical essay on that is the beloved romance author, Jennifer Cruzy. She has absolutely incorporated Shirley Jackson into her critical essays on what I'm reading.
I love
So,
that.
and she had lots of wonderful things to say because that's what I'm talking about when I talk about these through lines.
Yeah.
There are through lines like if I'm talking about romance or even mystery, there are through lines. And it's funny because the first time Neil chatted with me, he said he was asking about like why gothic and you have mystery in there, and I said, well, I put mystery in there because I knew I was going to be interviewing Sherry Thomas.
Hmm.
And for anybody who's listening to Anna's show that doesn't know, the most magnificent woman ever, Sherry Thomas, happens to live here in Austin, so we knew each other.
Yeah.
And she wrote like the Lady Sherlock series, but before the Lady Sherlock series, she wrote with romance novels that are still considered some of the best romance novels ever written.
Hmm.
And English is a second language for her. So that's even like an extra feat
Yeah.
of magnificence. So anyway, but the reason why that works is because there's a Gothic through line. You're not going to talk about Sherlock Holmes in any way, shape, or form, or even the Victorian era without having a lot of Gothic elements.
Hmm.
And so that's just, there's always going to be these through lines. And Shirley Jackson is absolutely a through line into all of this too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
she's my fave. I love her.
I've only read We Have Always Lived in the Castle and now and The Haunting of Hill House, but I immediately purchased everything that I could off of like thrift books as soon as that I wanted. I was like searching
Yeah.
for a cool paperback copy, but I haven't found one yet. I'm always on the hunt whenever I go to used bookstores, but I need to sit down and read more of her stuff. I really want to sit down and read all of her stuff, but it's such a I feel like it's such a dedication because as soon as I finished The Haunting of Hill House, I flipped right back to the front cover and
Right.
started reading it again. And I know myself, and I know I'm not going to be chill about any of her other books. I'm going to want to do the same thing. So,
The Cup of Stars.
yes. Well, I literally got it tattooed on my arm. I got my little cup of stars tattooed. Yeah,
So,
that book.
okay, that was going
Just,
to be my question for you is
yeah.
a lot of people fall into the category of either, and it says everything you need to know about you. Are you a Hill House fave or a We've Always Lived in the Castle fave?
It's I- I've talked to a few friends about this, and they because I read them back to back. I did Hill House first, and then I did We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and I kind of preferred Hill House, but I for the reason that I felt like it was a much more aggressive, meaner novel that left me like spinning by the end of it and being like, what the fuck? Like, did I just read? Like, immediately going back and wanting to pick up all of the things that I missed before. And I felt very much that way about We Have Always Lived in the Castle. It was just a little bit quieter for me. So coming off of like the big bang and then going into something that wasn't quite as aggressive, I think that's probably why I feel that way. But I know that that same ideology and theme is there for We've Always Lived in the
Well, but
Castle.
that's why We've Always Lived in the Castle is my fave because you
Yeah.
know that for me and my taste, I love the slow build of dread.
Yeah.
I love the slow build of dread with women at the center.
Hmm.
And I know that that's true in Hill House too, but it is more aggressive.
Yep.
I love uh that the humans in the story of We Have Always Lived in the Castle are the point of terror. And I
Yeah.
love like the isolation that they feel. Like there's a larger group. It's almost like Clue,
Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in Hill House, but in We've Always Lived in the Castle, it's sort of like them against the world.
Hmm.
And so it's not them against a ghost, it's them against other people, and that's fucking terrifying. And so
Absolutely.
to me, and it's the slow build of dread, and then like there are things in there that I really found interesting, which is like Maricat. And I talked about this on my cat episode. I did a cats and fiction episode,
Yeah.
and I talked about Maricat and her cat because the cat, I mean, her name is Mary Catherine, but she goes by Maricat. And then they talk about her mother as far as like the first of the cats. And they talk, and there's like this through line with cats and stuff like, and I'm like, yes, give me this black cat lore,
Yeah.
and different things like that. And then when you see the movie, it looks exactly the way I had in my brain. Well, if anybody knows me, and of course you would think these women running from houses would be all you need to know about me as well. I love mid-century like the wallpaper and their clothes and all of it. And there's like this element of stoicism in the
Hmm.
1950s that lend itself to the slow build of dread. And that's why I love We've Always Lived in the Castle. Like, so everybody has their favorite, and you can tell like their taste in general, with which one of those they choose as their favorite between, because there's always one.
Yeah.
Like everyone always has a favorite between those two.
No, I totally get it. Yeah. I'm very curious if I like because I read them so close back to back, how that affected my reading experience. And it's definitely they're both books that I would reread again in a heartbeat. There's so much to pick up on all of them. On every line is what I think is like I could reread each paragraph in that book and probably take away something different every time that I read it. But yeah, no, I'm a big Jonas fan too. Every time I see a little black cat, I'm like Jonas, and my husband's like, "Who the fuck is Jonas?" I'm like,
Listen,
yeah, exactly.
Jonas, give him the respect. No, I
Yeah,
have orange cats, but I still love him. All cats. If I could have every stray cat, like it's kitten season, and I'm
yeah.
sitting here going, okay, it's kitten season. I need to brace myself because I'm going to want all the kittens. Yeah. But then I also want all the elderly cats so they have a happiness before they go. I'm not going to be a cat hoarder because I'm going to consciously make the effort not to be, but it's really hard not to.
Listen, the
I'm
first
creepy in
step.
and of my own
No.
self. Yeah.
Acknowledgement is the first step because listen, I feel the
Yeah.
same way about dogs. I want to save all of them, but we only have
It's
so
so
much yard
hard
space.
not
It
to.
is. It is. Especially on Facebook when everybody's always posting the ones that they find in a ditch.
I
Oh, it's
know.
terrible.
Or this person, like their human died, and so they're like 10 years old by themselves. I'm like, oh, that's terrible.
I know. Yeah, yeah. No, they're out for I think that they're out for us, honestly. I think that it's the other way around, but oh man. Well, Agatha, this conversation has been really, really lovely. I want to kind of start wrapping up because it's been an hour, but what
I'm
can
sorry.
oh my
That's
God.
probably my fault.
No, I listen, I could talk for hours and
You've
hours
asked
on
me to
end.
talk about books, honey. That's your fault.
Listen, I know what I signed up for, okay? What can we promote for you? I mean, obviously we have the show that you do, She Wear Black, but like what does the show look like for you this year? Like, is there anything really special that you want to promote or plug about it? Or, like what can we promote and plug for you in this space?
Very generous of you to ask. Honestly, just the show. I mean, find me on socials. I'm on Instagram and Threads. I'm in Blue Sky, but only sort of.
Yeah, me
And
too. Hit or miss
yeah,
there.
exactly. I mean, we gotta find what works for us. I do have a Patreon where most of what I do is community based. So I have like we get together and chat about books while we craft or puzzle or color. This goes again to my demographics. There are no 25-year-olds that are tuning in and looking for my community.
Listen, if I wasn't recording interviews, I would be there. I would be coloring on your crafty AMAs because I love that idea so much.
Oh, we love it though. And then what I do is like after like a couple of days later, I'll post all the books that we talked about
Yeah.
and like I'll give a summary and everything. And then I do have a book club where an author joins us to chat with the members directly. That's the members' time with the authors. We have lots of fun. I do other things on there sometimes, but those are random. You know, I'm pretty basic with that's concerned. So yeah, I'm there and mostly just look out for the book. I mean, you can follow my Agatha Andrews author. I'd really like to promote that. My
Okay.
Agatha Andrews author socials, as much as my podcast page, just because I have a lot of really cool information that I'm trying to put on there regarding this like history with these gothics and
Yeah.
whether it's the artists who paint the covers, whether it's like comparing the AI hell we're in now with the covers they're trying to give these old books versus the originals. And it's like, interesting things. I'm always trying to throw an interesting angle. Sometimes it's a fashion commentary on these covers. Who knows? But
I love that. No, I love that very, very much. Yeah, I'll make sure that I link both of your social media pages, both for the show and for your author account in the show notes. But
yeah.
no, listen, I'm all for the fashion commentary on book covers because there are some things that I see and I'm like, I don't even know what that is on that woman. I'm very curious.
Well, sometimes it's a bob, sometimes it's flowing hair across their face. Who knows?
Yep. Well, we'll know whenever we go to your social media
Right.
page and find out. So
Thank you.
you can give
Sometimes
us the
it's a pencil
answers.
skirt, sometimes it's an ambiguously historical gown.
Yeah. Yeah.
It-
You
anyway,
give
but
us
thank
the
you so
answers
much.
we're dying for, and I love that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my
It's
God, no,
been a
thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on. And I appreciate everything that you have built in this space for women because I don't know that I would be doing what I'm doing without having listened to you and Stephanie and everybody else who's been a strong female voice in this space. So thank you for being here and doing what you do to inspire people like me who don't have any interview experience. And you're like, yeah, I can try that.
Hey, I mean, no limits.
Yeah. Oh, thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Agatha.
That was so much fun. I just listened back to all of that, editing it, and I was like, oh my god, that was so much fun. I had fun whenever I recorded it, and I had fun when I listened back to it. The fun fact about all of this is that this was like one of my first times actually having a lengthy conversation with Agatha, and then at Stoker, which was after this was recorded, we got to hang out more, and we had so much fun. So yeah, this is just a great little nugget of a memory of a time well spent with a good friend, and also I just respect the hell out of all of the work that Agatha does, the work that she does to promote literacy, and how critically she thinks about books and making sure that the right books land in the right people's hands. I love the way that she thinks, I love the way that she talks about books. So yeah, this was just a great time all around. Um, yeah, I'm just on cloud nine after listening to that conversation again. So don't mind me. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you all have been having a lovely week and a lovely summer. I will be back with you next week with some more episodes, some more author interviews, another bonus episode, and yeah, stay tuned for what all that looks like. But thank you to everybody for listening in, and I will see you all next week.